Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I am joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how's it going?
Sup? Good to be here.
Excellent. I'm also joined by Porfirio Rangel. Porfirio, how goes?
It's going good, Henry. It's pretty warm here in the Bay, which I love.
Yes, yes, summer is about here. Today is May 16th, 2025. And we are just off of our viewing of Thunderbolts, the latest Marvel Studios movie release. We saw it 2 weeks ago tonight, and we're here to talk all about it.
Woohoo.
So, yeah, let's give the spoiler alert. So, you've been warned, spoilers are fair game for Thunderbolts. Let's get it going. So, Thunderbolts is not exactly a Marvel Comics title that is widely known. So I'm curious, what were your thoughts about Thunderbolts getting their own movie and your expectations going in to see this one? You want to kick it off, Porfirio?
Sure. Yeah, like you said, Henry, Thunderbolt's not really a common title if you're a Marvel reader. I mean, you probably know about it, but you haven't. I don't think like you're gonna go rush to a comic book store and buy a comic books of Thunderbolts. So I was kind of surprised that when Marvel Studios announced this project, and just going in, I just had the lowest expectations. I'll be honest. I really did not care for this movie, but I was like, whatever. It's a Marvel movie. I'm just gonna go and watch it and probably have a good time.
Got it. How about you, Christian? Expectations?
Yeah, my expectations were also pretty low going in. I, I think I remember they released like a picture of the roster, and I was like, I don't know, looks okay. It's side characters from other movies coming together.
Mm-hmm.
I've never read a Thunderbolts comic in my life. It's like I kind of know of them tangentially, you know, from other Marvel comics or here and there, but um yeah, I was not going into this, I think, with the highest of expectations as well. Especially after I think Brave New World, which none of us were really all that high on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you guys. I didn't have the highest of expectations either. You know, despite the fact that I am a big Winter Soldier and Yelena fan, um, yeah, this one was a bit of an unknown quantity here. You bring up a good point, Christian. Like Brave New World was a bit of a disappointment to say the least. And like going into the year 2025, I was more hyped for Brave New World than Thunderbolts. So after Brave New World was kind of a disappointment, like I was like, oh shoot, what is Thunderbolts gonna even be, right? So yeah, expectations are definitely low on my end as well. But like kind of like Porfirio, I was like, it's Marvel, we're getting together, and it can still be fun. So, I'm gonna give it a chance. So that's how I was going in for this one. Yeah. Okay. So then we actually saw the movie itself, and yeah, let's get some general thoughts like about like what were some things you guys liked about this movie? Like we were talking about how this Marvel team isn't like all that well known and we had low expectations, but I know we all enjoyed it to differing extents. Um, Thoughts on like what you liked about the movie? Christian, you want to kick it off here?
Yeah, I'll kick it off with I'll start with pretty much the main character, which is Yelena Belova. She definitely fills in the main character role pretty well here. Florence Pugh, I think, does a wonderful job, and the movie, like, it's centered around this, like, her, like, she's like bored, she's depressed, and she feels like she's like stuck in a rut. and I thought it was a good way to start the movie. How like she works for Valentina, and I think you had a really cool action scene where she's really bored, but she's like just kicking a lot of ass. Great like one take fight scene overhead in the very beginning, and think she really anchors the film super well. I was that's one part I think that like really struck me. I think first that I didn't expect was I did like her quite a bit in Black Widow, but I think here it does really elevate her to this like, oh wow, I'm really excited to see where they take her next.
Right on. How about you, Porfirio? Anything you liked about this movie?
Yeah, kind of going off what Christian said, just the characters. I didn't really have any expectation for them because there's U.S. Agent, Ghost, Taskmaster, Red Guardian, Yelena. Like these are kind of like side characters you've seen in other movies, and I guess you just don't really care for them. Again, kind of like where that low expectation comes from for Thunderbolts. But what I've really enjoyed for this is that they took the time with these characters to just flush them out, to learn about their backstory, why they kind of are like messed up in a way, and they just become so complex, and you kind of do feel for them. And I just thought that was just really great writing to just the character development with these folks, with these villains, and it was just super well done. Props to that.
Right on. Yeah, and a little bit more on Yelena. Like, this is an ensemble cast, but make no mistake, I think, like Christian was alluding to, Yelena really is the main character of this movie, and like Florence Pugh is really like the lead actor on this one. Yeah. Um, and I do agree, she's great in the role. And kind of like what you were saying, Porfirio, her character is really developed well in this movie. You understand like what's going on with her. And yeah, there's a whole like mental health angle going on here where she's just like not fulfilled. She's depressed and she's just got kind of going through some stuff, right? So a pretty interesting take that I wasn't really expecting here. So that was kind of a pleasant surprise, that whole mental health angle. And we're definitely going to talk more about that, I think. Um, but yeah, I definitely am in agreement on that stuff. What else? What else do we like about this? Anything else, Christian?
Yeah, I think let's see, another character I think that really stood out would be John Walker. Um
Mm-hmm.
he's definitely the heel of the group. He's definitely like they play up the assholeness, I think, of him, especially in the beginning when they're all like trapped in the bunker and you have them all like kind of you have a lot of really good back and forth. Um Whereas Yelena works to really like anchor the plot. Like I said, he's kind of the heel of the group, the asshole, the like I would say um the Rocket Raccoon, whereas Yelena is probably your Star Lord. And I think that makes for, he helps out like the like group social dynamic really well. And he also probably is the best lines, like they turned my shield into a taco. Or
Yeah.
so I was surprised on how much I liked, the not Captain America.
Yes. Porfirio, thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, I found the film had a great like balance of action and comedy. Like there was like, that beginning battle scene between the lot of them all trying to kill each other because they think they have to kill that person. But then there's like so many kind of like comedic moments of like, oh, like I'm not after you, or like Christian said, like US Agent had so many great comedy lines, and him and Yelena's like dialogue was just comedy gold. So I feel like sometimes Marvel movies just take it too far with the comedy, like Thor 4. I feel like that's the best example I could give. But this one, I feel like it just gave the right amount and it wasn't so overwhelming. And there was just a great amount of like action to kind of help balance that.
Yeah, like I think one thing I've noticed in a lot of Marvel movies is you all have like a big action or a big emotional scene, and then like this like joke that kind of undercuts the whole thing, you know? Whereas one thing I liked about this movie was that like it doesn't really have that. It lets like emotional scenes play out, and then you have like this humor just kind of come up when it feels more natural, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
in the dialogue, and like it feels more like you're watching the characters be the characters rather than, oh crap, we need to put a joke here. John, say something funny, or Red Guardian, say something funny.
Right on. Yeah. So I was alluding to it earlier, but there is an interesting like mental health angle with this movie, right? So yes, this is a Marvel movie. There is action, there is comedy. Porfirio, you're saying it balances the two well. But in my mind, like that's kind of expected. Like pretty much any Marvel movie, you're gonna get like a mix of those two things, and that's kind of why we go to see these movies, right? We go to laugh and we go to get thrilled by awesome effects and action scenes. But the big surprise, and it's a positive one for me, is that the whole mental health thing. Like I was completely like taken off guard by all that. Big surprise because ultimately what this movie boils down to is superheroes versus depression and anxiety. Like that's like the main theme of this movie, right? And like I could not have been more surprised from that, right? So I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on that. Like when that kind of unfolded, like and it really is like the Sentry character's storyline where this evolved from, right? So when that whole thing is unveiled, like, what do you guys think about that? Like the fact that this really isn't about like the bad guys or the good guys beating the bad guy, and it's not so much saving the world, but it's really this like how to battle your inner demons sort of thing, right? So thoughts there? Sounds like looks like Porfirio, you have some thoughts there.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Okay.
No, yeah, that whole mental health theme was so like surprising to me, and I was down for it. Like I feel like the last time a Marvel movie has really um talked about like mental health was like Wanda in WandaVision when she's dealing with grief,
Mm-hmm.
or with Bucky in Falcon and Winter Soldier when he's dealing with like the whole like being mind controlled and everything. You know, there's
Mm-hmm.
that one powerful scene he has in Wakanda. And so I just feel like this movie just did a great job of just not just being an action movie, not solely relying on that, but talking about something serious. And it just makes the characters feel more human, I think. You know, each character has like their own kind of thing that they're dealing with. Yelena has unresolved issues with the loss of her sister. She's dealing with depression. Um, US agent, he's like dealing with like this sense of lost glory as this Red Guardian. And then like you said, Sentry is dealing with like this like I don't know, like bipolarism kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just great that we have like these like wide range of like mental health issues that each character is dealing with, but they're all there s- in their own like weird way supporting each other. And I just thought that was
Mm-hmm.
really great and unexpected, but I was down for it.
Cool. Thoughts, Christian?
Yeah, um, I really like that. I think that freshens up the movie quite a lot. Because you do it, I think with a lot of these movies, you kind of expect, okay, they establish the big bad, and then they have this big fight scene with the big bad, um, and that's how it ends. But I think the way, and it's just them, they take down Sentry, they take down Valentina. That's how you kind of expect it to play out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like once Void is like truly introduced, And like I think it's cool that it take like a much different turn how they have the battle, and you're just like, oh crap, they just can't do anything against him. He
Mhm.
is so much more like they are so out of their league against him. And and then he starts having this like, like that disappearing power, which I
Mhm.
thought looked really cool. It looked really cool. It looked really like kind of like disturbing how like they're
Mhm.
just like gone, and you just see
Yeah.
this, you hear that sound effect, and you just see the shadow.
Yep.
They're sent to the shadow realm, and so like you just see New York being sent to the shadow realm. And so I thought the nightmare rooms were a cool way to like end everything, as the big final set piece. It felt very new. It felt very something you wouldn't really see in like a Marvel movie. And I thought um it was definitely like, it was a nice way to freshen the movie up while also kind of like giving it a really good theme for the entire movie to kind of culminate around. This depression angle that's resolved with the power of friendship.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about how in a typical Marvel movie, like you're saying, Christian, the superheroes team up and they take down this incredibly formidable villain. But in this one, the way the heroes win the day is with a big, huge group hug. And it's not what you typically see in a superhero movie, right? So I agree that it was very refreshing. It's a kind of a cool take on the genre, right? So good to see for sure. So we can certainly continue with positives, but what about negatives? Is there anything you didn't like so much about Thunderbolts?
You know,
Thoughts there?
this might shock you, but I put a lot of thought into this. But
Hmm.
for me, a really big negative for me was killing off Taskmaster so early in the
Mm,
movie. Like, I read reports to why it happened. Like, it was needed to kind of like have like Yelena kind of feel some sort of way and more sympathy to like towards Taskmaster, in her past. And
hmm.
I also imagine, Taskmaster did not get that much love in her movie. A lot of fans were upset about the gender swap and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But, I thought about this more after the movie, and we talk about this what we liked about the movie, which is the mental health thing. And Taskmaster did deal with a lot of shit. She dealt with brainwashing and just that whole like being controlled by someone. Like I just feel like if anybody that could relate to Sentry more about like not being in control of your own body would have been Taskmaster.
Mm-hmm.
And it would also it would have been cool to see more action scenes with Taskmaster, but I just think like more if you're gonna talk about this theme of mental health, I think Taskmaster would have been a great character to go dive in further with that storyline.
Good take. I dig it. How about you, Christian? Any negatives to call out here?
I definitely agree with the whole Taskmaster getting killed off too quickly. Oh, something's up with my microphone. There we
Oh,
go.
you're good.
Um, so what I said was I agree with Taskmaster getting killed off too quickly. I think it's something that happens so like blink and you miss it within the plot,
Hmm.
and like Taskmaster just shows up and just like gets shot in the head out of nowhere. And you're kind of wondering like why bring Taskmaster, why have Taskmaster at all in this movie
Hmm.
if
Yeah.
you're just gonna have Taskmaster just like die this quickly. And I guess it's shocking, and it does like have that like kind of a whoa moment.
Hmm.
But I don't know, like it makes you think like there was something planned with Taskmaster originally that they had to write out.
Yeah.
So like I don't know. Like it feels more confusing. And then when we saw it, when we were all in the theater, um, there was like a kid and his mom next to me, and I feel like this kid really liked Taskmaster because like he kept whispering to his mom throughout the movie about how they killed off Taskmaster, and he was real disappointed. Then he talked about it after the movie was over during the credits. So it's a negative, especially for this kid
Yeah.
who probably really loved Taskmaster from like say like the Spider-Man PS4 game and was like, "All right,
Mm.
this is the moment. This is the one." Nope.
Yeah. Oh, I
Real
feel bad
quick,
for that kid.
for sure,
Uh,
definitely. Real quick, I just want to
Go
say,
ahead.
like, I don't know if this is a negative or not, but the trailer also did not do justice about like if Taskmaster was gonna be in Thunderbolts or not.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
we had talked about like, you know, then that the trailer showed like one scene of Taskmaster, just like blink and you miss it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, like, even when they did that whole like reveal of who's going to be the cast that's going to be in Doomsday, the Thunderbolts team was announced, except Taskmaster.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, like, I don't know if they were like doing like some kind of like they were trying to pull off some like Infinity War trailer thing of like only showing something, but just teasing the audience and messing with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, now that I know what's happening, it's like, okay, that really just kind of then was a waste. Like Christian said, like it just felt like a waste of a character to why even bring it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I remember before the movie started, we were actually discussing, you know, do you think Taskmaster is gonna die? And is he gonna die like early? Because yeah, you're right. In the trailer, she's hardly in it. And in fact, there's a shot of the team in an elevator, and like everyone's in the elevator except Taskmaster. So it's like this doesn't bode well for this character. Then sure enough, she is killed. And yeah, you guys are right. Like she's killed very suddenly and abruptly. Um, and it does make you wonder, like, why is she in this movie in the first place, right? I definitely was asking myself that question, and I guess it boils down to a few things. One is, as I understand it, this movie went through a lot of different considerations, different storylines, different casting, et cetera, et cetera. So might have been a situation where they wrote this character into the movie and maybe they wrote themselves into a corner where they couldn't get rid of the character entirely. So they're like, okay, I guess we just got to kill her right away. Who knows, right? These things can happen. The other thing is merch. This is a Marvel movie. Taskmaster has a cool new outfit. Maybe they want to sell some toys. There's that angle. But I think the main one I'm thinking is character development. You're talking about character development, right, Porfirio? So the death of Taskmaster is like, okay, this character amounts to very little for herself in this movie, but for the other characters, the surviving characters, she acts as character development, right? We've seen this in TV and shows all
Hmm.
the time. I think as a plot device, I think that's kind of where what she amounts to. Sadly enough, that's it. Just other characters developing in the story. And that's about it.
Hashtag justice for Taskmaster.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah, but for me, like I was thinking like would the movie have been better if she stayed alive, like you're saying, Porfirio, and was fully fleshed out and that sort of thing? It sounds like you definitely would have liked to see that. Like for me, I don't know. Like, I feel like some characters are developed well, like we've been talking about Yelena, but other characters not so much. Like I think Ghost and Bucky are kind of minimalized in this movie, and adding another character into the mix, Taskmaster, may have thinned out the character development even more, right? So that might have been consideration too. Like there's only so much runtime they have here, and they can't have too many characters. And my thinking is like, yeah, a lot of characters were already getting shortchanged, so that might have been just like you know, even more like adding to that, right? What else? Any other negatives you want to call out here for Thunderbolts? Christian?
Yeah, like let's see, because you mentioned like yeah, some characters getting shortchanged. I do feel like as much as I like John Walker, I do feel like a lot of what he does is in the first act, but in the second act,
Mm,
they also like kind of short. I feel like they kind of shortchange him a bit, where I think like the nightmare rooms were such a cool concept.
hmm
That I think like I would have liked to see him for some of the other characters towards the end. Because you only get your Elena's, you get a hint of Ghost, or not Ghost. You get a hint of John Walker and Valentina
Mm-hmm.
as
right.
well. That is just when they touch Sentry, though.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been, yeah, I think that would have been pretty cool to see, like kind of the full fledged Nightmare Room. I don't know how if that would have kind of bloated everything, but like I think that would have been cool to see it. I do think that like after a while, it's like as the movie kind of progresses, it becomes more and more about Yelena,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
rather than the team Thunderbolts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Going off a point that you kind of mentioned earlier, Henry, like, there wasn't that much like character development. I feel like, yeah, with Ghost and Bucky. With Ghost, I read an article that like if Taskmaster had lived, that she would have developed some kind of relationship with Ghost to kind of
hmm
like explore like again like not having control of your body. So I feel like maybe that was intended for that to give them more backstory if they had intended for Taskmaster to live. So they would have gone like on some kind of like connection journey together. So maybe when they cut
hmm
her, then they also kind of cut that storyline for Ghost. There's that. And then, you kind of made this point when we watched it in theater. There was like Bucky again there was no really character development for Bucky, like
Yeah.
he's introduced into the Marvel universe as some kind of congressman now for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And then he goes back into like his Winter Soldier kind of ways. And he does I feel like the only time Bucky really contributes is when like he takes out the trucks that are chasing the group.
Yeah.
Other than that, I feel like if you take Bucky out of the movie, it would not make a difference whether or not he was in it. That's how I see it. So I just feel like yeah, they totally like shortcasted Bucky in this movie.
Yeah, I agree there. I'm a big Winter Soldier fan, and I kind of thought that this movie would be his first like major role, like starring role. He's always been kind of on the sidelines or as a villain even. But I kind of got the impression that he would be like number one on the call sheet, right? But it really turned out that Yelena is the main character here. And not only that, but Bucky is yeah, like we've been saying, not really fleshed out. He doesn't have a whole lot of character development. And a lot of what we see from him in this movie is stuff we've seen before. This is kind of how we've seen him in the past, and there's nothing really new that we're seeing from him.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's of course it's cool to see the Winter Soldier in action in anything in a show or a movie. But yeah, and if you're looking for like a new angle on Bucky, it's really isn't it, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of treading in familiar territory.
Yeah, it did seem like they wanted to take Bucky in a new direction with the whole congressman thing. Because they like bring it
hmm
up out of nowhere in Cap 4, but like
Yeah,
and it's like brought up and then dropped. It's like as they're writing it, they just didn't really realize what they were gonna do with Bucky as a congressman.
yeah,
And they're like, "Ah, I don't think this works. All right, just throw it out. All right, yeah, he gets fired from the job halfway in
yeah,
the movie too, or something.
yep. Okay, so similarly, we can continue to throw out negatives here and there, but we can move on. I'm gonna just start kind of throw some stuff out there for you, maybe devil's advocate kind of stuff. Get your takes. So what went through my mind a lot in this movie is, despite the whole mental health angle, a lot of the movie I felt did tread in familiar territory, going back to the well on certain things, if you will. You know, we see Avengers Tower in the movie. There is the reveal that the Thunderbolts would be named the new Avengers, you know. Again, wedging the Avengers name into a Marvel movie. We've seen this before, you know. Um, but other stuff too, like again, Yelena is great in the movie. Um, but the whole like father-daughter stuff with Red Guardian and Yelena felt very familiar. Like, I think it would have been great had we not seen it before, but we saw like the exact same shit from Black Widow, right? It's like it's pretty touching, and both David Harbour and Florence Pugh are great in these scenes. But like in my mind, I was like, we have seen this before, you know? And it was kind of better in that movie where like Red Guardian's talking about like some crazy story about pissing in the frozen temperatures or something. Uh, it was very familiar territory, you know? As was the idea of this like incredibly mentally unstable villain, right? We kind of saw that in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, right? With Adam Warlock. Um, and yeah, the Sentry character seemed very similar to that character. So yeah, so I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on that, just how a lot of it felt like treading in familiar territory. Did you guys get a similar sense? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I did too. I think the way they executed it, especially felt it felt fresh while also feeling familiar in some parts. Like you could almost say that like, oh well, we have this bad guy that's way too strong. We have to appeal to his emotional side to get him to calm down. It was
Hmm.
kind of literally the plot of the last movie. The
Right. Yeah, that
because that
too.
was Red Hulk.
Yeah.
Um, and so and I think so. It does feel very familiar. So I will say I do think that it's executed better. Like I will say it's executed better here than Red Hulk was,
Mm. Hmm.
and I think the emotional beats. I think here I think I prefer here than Black Widow. Um, so I will say that like I like the way it was executed, and it was executed in a way that felt I think a little fresher than I think Marvel has been. Even though I will say it did tread some very familiar ground and a lot of very familiar plot beats for how, you know, the team gets together, but they kind of fight at first. They don't like each other. But then as the villain develops, they kind of realize they need to become a team. And you kind of have the characters kind of fill some familiar roles within the team. And then, you know, um, and then they, of course, they come together to save the day, like, you know, like your superhero movie.
Got it. Got it. How about you, Porfirio? What are your thoughts there?
I, for me, the only time I kind of really honestly felt like I've seen this storyline before is the first Suicide Squad movie. I mean, it's basically the same concept. Villains come together to be a supergroup. I just thought that this was done better. You already know the characters. You're not meeting them for the first time. Way more character development. Action is better. Comedy feels better. They come together to take down an unstoppable being, you know? But I just enjoyed this better. And you talk about the Black Widow, the movie of having that relationship, and I'm probably not the best person to say that I saw that already because I honestly don't remember that movie. I've only seen it once since we saw it in theaters. So if you tell me that happened, I honestly cannot remember that happened. So so for me, it felt fresh.
You're being honest. Fair enough. Good take. Good take. So hey, that's interesting you brought up the Suicide Squad comparison, Porfirio, because that was literally my next question. So yeah, when they announced this movie, my first thought was, oh, this is Marvel's crack at Suicide Squad, a misfit group of anti-heroes, Um, so that begs the question, how does this movie compare to A, Suicide Squad, B, The Suicide Squad, and C, Guardians of the Galaxy, 1 through 3,
Ooh,
because they're
ooh.
all sort of like treading in that somewhat familiar territory, right? This idea of a group of anti-heroes who are misfits and kind of they're like fuck ups, right? Like coming together and getting the job done, right? So I mean we're talking about very different movies here, but yeah, the core concept I think is kind of the
Mhm.
same. So when I bring up like those titles, like how do you feel about like Thunderbolts in comparison?
Hmm. I will say yeah, I think it's far better than the first Suicide Squad movie.
Hmm.
Yeah, the Will Smith one, of course.
Yeah.
Mhm. I second
Like,
that.
yeah, I would say they're, as a just narratively speaking, I would say, they're almost like I don't know, like are any of them really villains? Because like even Ghost, who- like who was the villain of Ant-Man 2, she was only doing it because, she was dying, and the movie kinda ends with her getting healed, you know?
Yeah.
And Ant-Man kind of is like, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna help you," at the very end and, like, actively helped her.
I mean, do we know if he helped her?
Well, because well, I guess Janet did that weird healing power thing
Uh-huh.
at the end of the movie and cured her, I think, and then she needed more of the stuff from the quantum realm, and that's when, Ant-Man gets sucked in the post-credit scene.
Mhm.
'Cause I think he was getting stuff from the quantum realm to bring back to help her.
Mhm.
So, like, I'd say it's almost like they're less, like, straight up villains than Suicide Squad or, like, you know and they're just more of, like, I guess, mercenaries. Like, I'd say this is closer to Guardians,
Mm.
where there's just
Hmm.
kinda misfit mercenaries,
Yeah.
as opposed to, like, straight up villains like Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, like, I would say that, although, like, I think it's a very similar idea where you just have the team of misfits, the team, who are a bit down on their luck, kind of get together, come together to save the day.
Mhm.
Yeah. Uh, Porfirio, any thoughts there?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, I enjoyed it better than both Suicide Squad movies. Um, I think I like Guardians more than Thunderbolts. The only reason for that is one, the music. The music
Hmm.
to Guardians was better than the music in Thunderbolts. But two, I felt like Guardians was cool because it was its own storyline, but it still played a part in the larger like Infinity Stone saga storyline. And it just felt like, like pre-Endgame just felt like you had to watch each movie to understand what was happening next. Whereas like I felt like Thunderbolts just doesn't, like I know there was that post-credit scene, but it just doesn't feel like it needs to be connected to the multiverse saga storyline that's going on right now. But like you said, I definitely see. It's not until you mention it right now for this question. I definitely see the similarities between all three groups.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you guys. Yeah, I think there's a place for all these movies, I think. Well, maybe except for the first Suicide Squad movie, which I think we're all in agreement was kind of hot garbage. Um, but yeah, I mean, with the other movies, the Suicide Squad and the Guardians movies. I mean, those are all James Gunn movies, right? And they have his stamp on them, right? They're very funny. They're much more comedic than Thunderbolts. So like again, they're different. And the Suicide Squad is a hard R, very violent, right? So yeah, a very different kind of movie. That said, it did make me think of like, oh, what if there was a rated R Thunderbolts movie? I mean, maybe a different movie, maybe more of an action-oriented movie, but I would be like, I'd be so down for that, like a hard R action, ultra violent Thunderbolts movie. Like, count me in. But anyhow, that's just a tangent. But yeah, again, I think there's room for all of these, and really, like, we keep going back to it, but like the mental wellness angle of this movie really kind of differentiates it from the other movies we talked about and pretty much any other uh superhero movie to date, really.
Henry, can I ask a question really fast?
Yeah.
You talk about a rated R Thunderbolts movie.
Mhm.
Now, would you want to see the same characters or a different cast?
Oh, so when I say like I would want to watch a rated R Thunderbolts, it would be with this cast,
Uh-huh.
but like a completely different storyline. I
Okay.
don't want that group hug at the end. I want to see some bloodshed. You know what I mean? So
Uh,
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like you might need a different villain,
yeah,
one that
yeah,
can lend itself to some more gore.
yeah, yeah. Right. Okay. So what else we got here? Okay, there was a discussion we had right after the movie, but um like with the MCU, it like keeps getting bigger and bigger. There's more and more characters, more and more heroes, more and more villains. It's hard to like keep track of everything, and sometimes you gotta let some stuff slide. But at the same time, it's kind of hard to swallow a scene like you see in this movie where Bucky's like this is the team. There's no one else. Only we can do this, right? And in my mind, like, oh my God, there are so many other superheroes who could get involved here, right? Like literally, Bucky has had a conversation with Sam Wilson, Captain America in Brave New World. Like they are like best friends, right? You can't make a call and like Cap has a sidekick, Falcon, Joaquin Torres. Like, I mean, and that's just like one example. And this movie takes place in New York City. You're telling me you can't find a fucking Marvel superhero in New York City? Like, come on. Like, we just watched Daredevil. Like, Daredevil like operates in New York City. In that show, there are references to the Punisher and Spider-Man. Like for Bucky to say there's no one else is just like completely ridiculous, right? So it's kind of like I said, it's kind of hard to swallow. In this universe, you kind of have to suck it up. I've been reading Marvel comics my whole life. This question always comes up, right? It's like, oh, can't you call this guy that guy? Like I just read a comic where he saves the day. Like where is he now? But it is getting tougher and tougher to justify stuff like this, right? So, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's also the problem with like having it take place in New York City.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
I bet they really, really wanted to have the old Avengers Tower in the movie, but like,
Hmm.
like it seems like the kind of thing like Doctor Strange would pick up like immediately. Because you have the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York City as well,
Hmm.
and you think something like that would have start happening, and it's the kind of thing where he would be there like immediately.
Yeah.
He's the first character I thought of, um, or like something that massive is happening, and it just seems like an event that would just bring heroes together.
Hmm.
Like Spider-Man would see that on the news and he'd swing over.
Hmm.
Doctor Strange would just like feel his presence.
Hmm.
Like one thing I really like I feel like like one of the only films that do this in Marvel really well is like Thor Ragnarok. when
Mhm.
Thor and Loki just like appear in New York and they're just doing nothing, but Doctor Strange just knows Loki's there and just like, has him fall for 30 minutes.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
And something like that feels so like I think like so natural to the Marvel universe,
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
it seems like something that would happen. It's such a cool cameo.
Yeah.
But I do, yeah. I guess that's a problem with just Marvel in general that I guess you just have to accept, unfortunately,
Yeah.
especially in the movies where rather than, oh, we just don't want to draw that character on this page. It's like, well, we don't want to pay this actor all this money to appear.
Right.
Or maybe they were trying to, but it's like, oh well, I can't. I'm making this other movie, scheduling conflicts.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just can't.
Mhm. You know,
So
if I lived in that Marvel MCU universe, like why would I still be living in New York? I feel like there's so many attacks in New York that it's just like I'm out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Right, it's too dangerous.
Right?
No, hard no.
We've had invasion attacks or alien invasion
yeah,
attacks. We've had shit fall down. Now like here's Sentry like disappearing people. Like why do people not leave?
Yeah, it's time
but
to
rent
go.
is just like so cheap there.
Yeah. All right. What else? We don't want to go too long here, but hey, let's talk about the post-credit scene. This, I believe, is what the longest ever post-credit scene in a Marvel Studios movie.
I
Yeah,
believe so. Yeah, I think
right?
it clocked at like 220, 230, something like that.
Yes. So, what do we think about this one? What happens in the Thunderbolts post-credit scene? Porfirio, maybe describe it to us.
Let's see if I can remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, the new Avengers, they come back to Avengers Tower after completing a mission, and I believe Bucky finds out that Sam trademarked the Avengers logo.
Oh, right. Yep, yep.
Yeah, which I do remember until Christian reminded me. And then yeah, then they find out that like there's something entering like their space, like their atmosphere, and it
Yeah.
turns out to be the Fantastic Four shuttle. Dun dun dun.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep. And the interesting nugget of information we get here is that it appears that the Fantastic Four are coming from another dimension. I think that's how it's described.
Hmm.
So I guess it kind of answers like how the Fantastic Four come into the MCU universe, right? Because watching the trailers and whatnot, you're like, oh, this looks cool. Like it takes place in like the 60s.
Hmm.
But why has there never been any mention of them
Hmm.
in the MCU to date? So this seems to answer that question, right? Well, it's not the universe of the MCU that we know, but a different one, right? So
Hmm.
that seems to be the case here. So, yeah, what were your thoughts, Christian, on seeing this post-credit scene?
Yeah, I thought it was a nice little teaser, especially because like I think we've gotten a lot of Marvel movies where they tease something that you're just like, okay, I have no idea when I'm gonna see that.
Hmm.
Hercules, is like,
Hercules, yeah,
yeah, is I think a big one, and there's kind of
yeah,
like a few others I think I just kind of
yeah.
forgot. The guy
Star
at the end of,
Fox,
Blade.
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, at the end of Eternals.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
So I'm sure you can name like, and there's probably a few more we're missing,
yeah.
but
Blade.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's cool. It's cool that they're just teasing the next movie, and you're just
Yeah,
like, oh, I can't wait to go see that in a few months.
yep,
Hmm. Hmm.
right. And that's
Hmm.
kind of how it used to be, right? Like I remember you saw Thor's hammer in Iron Man 2, like right before Thor 2
Hmm.
or Thor 1 came out, right? And
Mhm.
they would tease like the next movie, and that's kind of exciting.
it's like I don't want to be one of those fanboys, but it's like Marvel's back, you know?
Yeah, I've been hearing that mantra going around, Marvel's back.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if I'm completely sold on that, but we'll see. We'll see. Um, so before we get to ratings, any questions you guys wanted to pose to the group?
Hmm. So let's see. As far as like timing of this, I I do like this movie. As far as because I think this is the end of Phase 5, right?
Correct?
There's okay, so there's a part of me when I finished this movie that kind of thought like I kind of wish this was the end of Phase 4.
Yes.
I feel like you could tweak a few things in this movie, and I think would fit in as a Phase 4 finale. I think really well. And this almost seems like an era of the Avengers I'd want to explore before, because Avengers Doomsday is like right around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And there's two competing Avengers teams that they set up at the very end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not they have like a Civil War thing, I don't know, but I feel like that could be like I feel like that's a cool idea. Two competing ones, but they're not quite the original Avengers, but they both want the title.
Hmm.
And so I think that would be like a cool idea for almost like an entire phase,
Mm-hmm.
the way it's set up, you know? Like you just have to go tweak a few things and a few just like lines here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this could very much be a nice closer to phase 4 because the big things that follows up are Black Widow and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which both came, of course, at the very beginning of Phase 4. And I think
Mm-hmm.
this movie is pretty much a sequel to those two projects at the same time, while also throwing a little bit in from Ant Man and like I don't know the like Valentina. Sure, like you'd have to change her. Like I don't remember what she did in Black Panther 2.
Oh
So
yeah.
what do you guys think about that idea? Rather than being, do you guys think this fits where it is in the universe now, or do you think this should have been something
I
earlier?
agree with you, Christian. I feel like this should have been like the end of phase four. Like I feel like with the Infinity Saga, it was so easy to tell like this was a storyline of phase one. This was a storyline of phase two. Like I feel like phase four and five, I just feel like they're semi connected with the multiverse saga, but it's like, you know, you have Loki, you have the Marvels, you have Black Panther 2, you have Moon Knight. Like it just seems like all random. Like they just put all this content out together and they're like, oh, this is part of phase four, this is part of phase five, but it just feels so random. But I see your point that you're saying that this should have been part of phase four, and I do agree with that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, I do agree this movie does seem a little out of place, like doesn't quite belong where it is, where it's at currently. That said, you know, it's Marvel Studios, right? So I think we have to see how it plays out before we make our final judgments. Like we know that the Thunderbolts will be in Doomsday, right? So how they play in that, I think will ultimately show how well they fit in this timeline. Yeah. But yeah, I do agree that as it is right now, it just seems a little weird. It's sort of like wedged in at an odd time and yeah, like what you proposed, Christian, is interesting. Uh like rival Avengers teams going for the going for the title, right? It doesn't seem like we're gonna see anything like that, but like that, you know, that could have been a pretty interesting like phase had that played out that way.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm definitely in wait and see mode as to see how this plays out. It could be interesting how these characters progress into Doomsday. Any other questions for the group?
So I've read that there were in early drafts of this when they were trying to choose the roster, that there was talks about including folks like um Zemo and um a variant of King the Conqueror.
Mm-hmm.
Is I guess my question for you guys is which villain, when they announced the project, which villain did you wish was included into this team? Or do you have wanted to see in this team?
Mm.
Like on the team or someone they would fight? Like
In
if
on the
a
team.
Sentry instead. Oh, okay, on the team.
Uh-huh.
I heard a lot of people say Abomination would
Mm,
have been a nice add.
mhm,
Like, well, I like the characters. I will say the team dynamic, or in terms of like move set, is very much just like Captain America and guns.
uh-huh.
They either have some power, because you have Red Guardian and Bucky, who just they or Red Guardian and John Walker, who just have variations on Captain America, and then you have Bucky, which is kind of both a variation on Captain America and guns, and then Florence Pugh guns, except for Ghost, which is the shape shifting power.
Mhm,
Mm-hmm.
So Abomination I think would be was someone I heard tossed around.
mhm,
Um, let's see. I also, even though he doesn't have any powers, Baron Zemo,
mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like you said. And I'm trying to. I feel like there's another one on the tip of my tongue that I can't remember, but would be very cool. So I don't know. Do you have anyone, Henry, you want to shout out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Christian, you mentioned Baron Zemo. Porfirio, you mentioned Baron Zemo. I'd be down with that. Now, I think the uh the Zemo storyline that you alluded to, Porfirio, had Baron Zemo being like the guy behind it all, right? And
Mhm,
like there's supposed to be like a post-credit scene where that is revealed. That would have been kind of cool, I think. Um, Not only because I like the Zemo character, but also like that's kind of like comics canon, right? Like Baron Zemo is behind the comics Thunderbolts. Um, this movie Thunderbolts team has very little to do with like the original Thunderbolts Marvel comics,
mhm.
um, which is fine. But it would have been kind of cool to have Zemo behind it all because that would have been kind of a nod to the comics, right? So that's cool. That would have been cool to see.
Mhm. I would have loved to have seen like instead of Valentina being the one in charge, I would have thought it would be cool to see Kingpin in charge.
Oh.
Like
Ah,
I've seen the comics, Mayor Fisk have his like own Avengers team, which is the Thunderbolts.
Hmm.
So I think that would have been cool to have Kingpin be in charge. And I know this is like probably like would never happen, but I know this character has been part of the Thunderbolts roster. I think it would have been cool to also see Venom be a part of it.
Hmm. There you go.
I was thinking, oh, if they can use Spider-Man characters, which they
Right.
definitely can't.
Right.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, it's been done. They've
Yeah,
rented Spider-Man characters before. Literally, Venom is in Endgame, right? So, you
yeah.
know,
He's in
The
Endgame?
or am I thinking of the
No
right
Way Home.
movie? No Way Home.
No Way
Sorry.
Home.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
was
I
like,
was like Norman Osborn. You know,
uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah,
Norman Osborn or Hobgoblin.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Throwing
for
the
sure.
goblin in
Especially,
it.
especially if we're talking about like New York City, like the Spider-Man villains are like running rampant there, right? So
Mhm.
Hmm.
it only makes sense.
But there is no Norman Osborn. Currently in the MCU right now.
That's
So
correct.
Not yet.
Not
yeah.
yet. All right. Let's move on to ratings.
Wait, I
What
have one
would
more question.
Oh, hold on.
I
Go
have one more.
ahead, Porfirio.
I know you're a big fan of this actor, Henry, and there was, when it first announced this team, it was originally Stephen Yu was
Mm,
gonna be cast for Sentry,
that's
and then
right.
and then
Yeah.
he had to leave the project because of scheduling conflicts because of the writer's strike. So
Right.
again, I know you're a big fan of him. I guess two questions for you. How did you feel that when he left the project, and how do you think he would have done with the Sentry role?
Good question. Yeah, I do like Stephen Yeun a lot. Um, when he first departed, I almost thought like, oh, that was probably a good move for him because kind of like what we've been saying, like initially we did not expect much from this movie at all. So I was like, yeah, maybe that was all for the best. Um, and to maybe leave the door open for working with Marvel in a different way in the future might be like a better thing. But now that the movie's out and I feel like it was a pretty decent movie. I enjoyed it. Like it wasn't the embarrassment I thought it might be. Um, it might have been cool to have him in there. Like, man, it is hard to imagine him in it though, because I feel like his century would be vastly different from Lewis Pullman's century, right?
Hmm.
So I feel like it might have been a totally different movie just because the actor portrayals would be so different. Um, but ultimately, yeah, I think it would have been cool. Like he's such a great actor that like he could not have like been like a negative on the movie. Like he could have only brought like a good performance and added to the movie, I think. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Any other questions for the group regarding Thunderbolts? I think we're ready to move on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're ready for ratings.
All right. Ratings on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being worst, 5 being best. What would you give Thunderbolts? Any volunteers to go first?
I go first.
Okay.
I give this a 4. I said that like in the beginning of this episode, I had the lowest expectations from it. I thought it was going to be not good. Like post Endgame, Marvel hasn't had the best track record. Now, when it comes to movies, I feel like it's always a gamble. It's like, oh, I hope this movie turns out to be good. And this movie was, for me, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought, again, action, comedy, character development, mental health issue, it was all really great, all top notch. I would totally go watch this movie again. Um, I really enjoyed this movie. Again, the only, I guess, critique I would have is just the death of Taskmaster. I feel like if she had survived, I feel like I probably would have given this a 5, but that's my only downside. So 4 out of 5.
Cool, cool. I can go next. Yeah, like I've been saying, I did enjoy Thunderbolts. Kind of to my surprise. Um, yeah, you know, I feel like a lot of this movie is rehashing stuff we've kind of seen before. Um, and honestly, stuff that we've seen before and done better. But ultimately, it is a pretty refreshing new take on the genre. This whole theme of mental wellness and battling your inner demons and dealing with anxiety and depression is a really refreshing take on the genre. And like, it's something that, you know, everyone deals with to an extent. So, bottom line, Marvel movies are great because they're relatable. And, this is another one of those pieces, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, like I kind of understand what these characters are going through because I kind of go through that, or I know people who are going through this stuff, right? And the message of the movie is a strong one. We got to be there for our friends. and we got to support each other. So I think that kind of pushed it over the top for me, right? Where I feel like, yes, there is action and comedy. Um, like those aspects of the movie, I feel like, well, you could probably get that elsewhere in a better way in other Marvel movies. But this new take, this little twist on the plot is like, okay, that makes this one worth checking out. So I'm gonna go with 3 out of 5 for Thunderbolts. How about you, Christian?
Um, I'm really going back between, I guess, a 3 and a 4 on this one. I
Hmm.
really liked it. I would recommend it. I think that in a way, I don't want to say it's back to basics, but well, we have seen a lot of what was done before, and the way it's structured done before. Better. We have, I think, been seeing it done worse as well, and I think some of the worst stuff you've seen a little more lately. Whereas when you watch this, I was kind of reminded of watching Marvel movies in like a Phase 2 and 3. I think this does what Marvel does best, where it takes a bunch of characters from other things that you watched, and then puts them together in a satisfying way. And I think it does a really good job with that. I think it executes everything pretty well, even though it treads on some familiar ground. Sometimes it like I said, it feels like, hey, I'm watching a Marvel movie. I get that feeling of like I'm excited to see what they do with these characters next, where the story goes. I had a great time watching it. Um, for the better. And sometimes you are kind of watching it like, yeah, I have seen this done before. But I think that twist with the mental health, and I think the theming of the mental health works really well in its favor and kind of making this feel fresh. Like I said, I'm going between a 3 and a 4. Um, let's see. So it, even now, I'm still like I still have a hard time deciding. I think between the two, but I'll say with what I kind of went out when I think we left the theater, I'll give it a 3, a solid 3. But I do want to see this movie again, and I can imagine myself seeing it again and bumping it up to a 4 later on. So 3 for I'll give it a 3.
All right, good stuff. Recommendations across the board for Thunderbolts. And with that, we can wrap up the episode. This is farewell from Henry, Christian, and Porfirio.